Hey, it's me. Alright, I'm going to give you a quick overview of the updated V2 chassis for the 112 FP platform. So if you are familiar with the platform, you can see already that several things have changed. Um, the bumper is only updated. It is the same as before for hole placements. The only difference is I've oversized it in the front over there. This is larger than it used to be. I vented it as well there to make it a little bit more breakable in case of hard shocks in the front, so this will take the heat instead of the screws on the main chassis plate, and it is slightly wider than before as well. The front floating plate is exactly the same as before, and that is pretty much all on the fiber parts that is similar. The pods, of course, everything for the hardware is the same. The front C-hub, the aluminum pods, the adapters and so on are the same. Now let's talk about the new chassis. So if you are familiar with my 128 PCOO platform, this is basically an oversized version of it. I have the flex plates, the flex cuts that are on the side now instead of at the center, creating a T-plate. So this is going to create a similar up and down and side sway behavior as the PC. So it is basically an enormous sway bar. The fact that I have the flex cuts and the pivot points of the flex all the way to the front allows for a more vertical up and down motion of the back, and this is quite progressive. And then I have created a lot of options for setting up the rear of the car. The battery mount is now a one-piece battery mount, and it's going to be for 1S, 2S shorty, and 2L LCG 2S shorty only. Of course, you can put a super shorty. We'll just have to put some pads in order to move it to the front or the back, but otherwise it's a fixed battery. The reason why it's not transversal, because of course the flex plates are going to bump against the battery. So this was kind of a default of an issue with the first chassis. The three wheel is the same. It's very minor when it's simply a very small part of the T-plates doing it, but now that it is two large lateral parts on each side, I don't want it to interfere at all with the battery, and I want as well to lower the CG as much as I can on this version of the car. So talking about the upper plates, on the further extremities it is the same placement for the body post. So anybody that you have already with the holes for the body, nothing is going to have changed in this version. The second hole is for damper tubes that will mount if required on the upper plate here. Oh, I've removed the wrong one. I want to remove this guy. So you could mount damper tubes from here to here, similar as the 3-tube setup I have done recently on my FP. As well, the part that I've just removed here is going to allow, so there should be one here and one underneath, and this will allow for 2 plates, a grease plate and springs setup. So that's going to be a possibility. Another thing that is going to be really cool is that I'm going to be able to have from this hole as well a spring mounted in order to kind of change the spring tension of the chassis itself by adding lateral springs. So there's going to be a possibility as well. And then you can see, so the mounting holes, they're going to be poles here and here and here. This is slightly too high. It's going to be a few mil lower than that, although it could be at that height as well. That's the full height of the LCG battery pack. And so you will be able to put 6 poles to mount it around, or only 4 poles. So this is just going to change the general stiffness of the chassis between the front and the rear. And here at the center you can see this is going to be a possibility to mount another shock or damper tube between the central battery plates and the upper the upper deck and the brace, the pod brace at the rear of there. So I've just added 3 holes here in order to change the length of the shock or damper tube depending on how this is going to be done. The reason why it is so far in front is because the pivot point is so far in the front of the chassis here that at the rear the movement is going to be fairly vertical. There's not going to be a lot of rotation at the back because the rotation center is so far in front. So if I had put a damper tube mount at the back like on the original pod brace, which is what I had planned to do before, the damper tube would have basically done nothing at all. Being so far in front, this is going to curb more to the front, and so that's going to activate a lot more the dampening between this part, which is really in front of the chassis. It's just before the floating front end over there. So I'm keeping the floating front end because I want to have it as a floating front end for people who like this setup, and to have it rigid or semi-rigid like I have done recently on my car. So this I think is a good option to keep. There's no reason to remove it. I could do the chassis directly with the C-hub mounts here, but once again there isn't really a good reason to do it, so I'm just keeping it as is. You can see the chassis as well is much larger than before. Basically before the width was about the width of this part here before the flex plates on the side, and it was going all the way to the front, so this is larger. And another thing that I have done is, so I have placed new mounting holes around the back of the flex plate over here, and those mounting holes are for side diffusers that are going to be pulling up the air just before the rear wheels. This I think is going to be a pretty interesting option to play with at the back. I'm going to make them just in white plastic like I do the other parts. This is going still to remain an ABS 3D printed part for the servo mount because I've never ever had an issue with this so far, so that's really the quickest and most efficient way to do the front. The SLA for servo mounts is problematic if you're going to modify your car a lot, because you can screw in and out as well as in the ABS, but after a while the SLA kind of loses the thread inside, and then it becomes just impossible to mount the servo. So I prefer to keep the ABS here, black ABS. The poles are going to be the brass poles that I used usually, and then at the rear you can see I have those 2 holes on the brace and I have the 2 holes at the bottom of the chassis. So these are placed at 24 mil away from each other, so that means you can mount a 30 mil fan at the back on the top here directly, and then it's just going to allow me to add some options at the back. If I want to, I can create a new part in between these, for example for a wing mount or a diffuser or whatnot. So I just thought I would add them into the manufacturing right away. This way future parts for the car can be made using those holes directly. And so this is why you have now so many different holes everywhere that are available. I want this to be once again like the original FP. It's very very simple. You can run it very very basic, and you can go crazy as well, setting it up completely differently from one car to another, or with your own car, just testing around the possibilities. So these are going to be the new parts that I'm going to be making. I still have a very low amount of pods, so I'm still going to be able to make a few prototypes and production cars before I have to reorder the aluminum pod for the car. So don't hesitate to let me know if you are into getting any one of the 112 or 110 chassis, the pancar, the freewheel, the classic, the 375, the long wheelbase F1. Let me know ahead of time because I need a little bit of time to remanufacture those aluminum parts over there. So here you go. This is the updates for the upcoming pancar for 2021. This is going to be the V2. basically it's following both the philosophy of the original FP as well as the PC platform, the 128, and it's mixing the two works together, and we'll see how it goes. So I'll keep you updated on that once things move along a little bit. All right, everyone, stay sane and safe. See you later. Bye bye.